Near the end of his life, James Coburn was asked a simple question. Is there one project you still think about? He didn't mention the films that won awards or the roles that made him rich. Instead, he went back to The Silent Flute, Bruce Lee's most personal, ambitious script. Before he died, James Coburn finally opened up about that journey.
Bruce?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, he was a groovy guy. Well, he related everything, his whole life was related to martial arts. He lived, breathed, fought, moved, everything.
The trip that ultimately shattered the vision for Bruce Lee's ambitious film project. The pivotal moment when Bruce came to the painful realization that Hollywood would never allow his personal vision to be fully realized on the silver screen. So, what happened to Bruce Lee's most deeply personal film? A project that was initially built on a radical script and bold ideas. How did it transform from an avant-garde vision into a watered-down cult film? And what did James Coburn, a man who stood so close to the action, witness up close that would alter the way he spoke about the film for the rest of his life? In this video, we're going to explore what really happened to Bruce Lee's lost movie. The one that was meant to define not just a career, but the philosophy and martial arts that he embodied, from its inception to its tragic distortion by Hollywood. Let's unpack the journey of The Silent Flute and the story of its untimely demise, along with the emotional toll it took on those who were closest to it, years after the dust had settled. When the magazine covers that had once celebrated Bruce Lee were yellowing and forgotten, James Coburn began speaking about the martial arts legend in a completely different way. The stories he told were no longer about the exciting kicks, the glamour of Hollywood parties, or the aura of fame. Instead, they became stories about deeper subjects, about respect, admiration, and regret. And in one revealing interview, he summed up his feelings with a line that, in hindsight, conveyed far more than he had initially realized. I must admit, it was hard to work with someone operating on that level. Coburn said, "It was difficult to watch the one film that was supposed to embody that mind get reshaped into something more palatable, safer, more commercial. And hardest of all to admit that sometimes when standing next to Bruce, I felt a flicker of jealousy, not his fame, but the way he fully lived a philosophy that so many of us only ever talked about." For Coburn, that film, The Silent Flute, wasn't just a movie. It was the embodiment of Bruce Lee's worldview. It was a perfect encapsulation of his thoughts, his ideas, and his approach to martial arts and life itself. But what Hollywood ultimately allowed that film to become was something far less profound, something that didn't capture Bruce's essence. And this is something Coburn would carry with him for the rest of his life. The beginning of the project, reformulation. When Bruce Lee first began developing The Silent Flute, he wasn't just working on a screenplay. He was laying the foundation for something far more significant. This wasn't your typical martial arts film, full of revenge plots and tournament-style fights. Instead, Bruce envisioned a story that was both a philosophical journey and a martial arts epic, blending his deep beliefs about life, self-mastery, and inner peace. What Bruce wanted to create was a story where every fight wasn't just about physical combat, but was imbued with deep psychological meaning. The project was the brainchild of Bruce, along with his close friend James Coburn and Sterling Silliphant, the screenwriter. They weren't just crafting a film. They were attempting to create a cinematic representation of Bruce's philosophy. For him, martial arts wasn't simply a discipline, it was a way of life. It was a path to enlightenment, a tool for self-reflection, and a method of confronting one's own flaws and inner demons. Bruce was clear about what he didn't want from The Silent Flute. He wasn't interested in another revenge-driven plotline or another film about an unrealistic martial arts tournament. Instead, he wanted a story that was much deeper, a narrative that took the audience on an inward journey, where each fight symbolized a deeper personal struggle. The central character, Cord, was a martial artist on a quest for a sacred scroll that promised ultimate knowledge and enlightenment. But Cord's journey wasn't just physical, it was spiritual and psychological. Each adversary that Cord faced wasn't just a physical opponent, but personification of an inner flaw, rigid form, inflated ego, uncontrolled desire. The final test, Bruce believed, wasn't going to be a fight to the death. No, it was a test of Cord's willingness to let go of everything. His attachments, his ego, his desires. The greatest challenge wouldn't be facing a physical enemy. It would be confronting the fear of surrendering to the unknown. Bruce wanted the audience to understand that true mastery didn't come from defeating others, but from conquering oneself. The story of the silent flute became a reflection of Bruce's most intimate beliefs. The combat sequences, which might have seemed like just violent action on the surface, were meant to symbolize something far more profound. Bruce often spoke about martial arts as a form of confession. To him, each kick, each punch, wasn't just an action to defeat an enemy. It was an act of confronting greed, fear, anger, and ignorance. Without this inner purpose, he believed, all the skill in the world was just noise, meaningless movement without any true depth or intention. Bruce's training sessions often seemed like impromptu philosophical dialogues. In his home, late at night, Bruce would perform simple strikes, often in the middle of the living room, and then pause to unpack them. The timing, the distance, the idea of empty-mindedness, the concept that a true fighter had no fixed form to defend, no rigid stance to adhere to. These were all elements Bruce would explore in his own unique way, often blurring the lines between physical technique and philosophical discourse. Out of these late-night discussions and training sessions, the silent flute began to take shape. On the surface, the film might have seemed like a typical martial arts adventure, with exotic locations, an ancient quest, and the promise of spiritual growth. But beneath this, there was something far more profound, a map of Bruce's personal philosophy hidden within the structure of a martial arts epic. In the film, Cord might have appeared to be chasing after power, but in reality, Bruce wanted the audience to witness Cord being stripped of his need for power, his desire, his style, his ego, and his fear. What Bruce was trying to portray wasn't the attainment of power, but the complete dissolution of the attachments that hinder personal growth. In this way, the real battle wasn't going to take place on the streets or in an arena. It was going to unfold within the very soul of the protagonist. In the silent flute, Bruce didn't just want to show off his martial arts prowess. What he wanted to do was create a film that represented the essence of his mind, his philosophy of combat, life, and personal mastery. For him, this was the true purpose of the film. Coburn and Silliphant weren't just collaborating with Bruce to create a movie. They were engaging in an intellectual and spiritual endeavor to bring Bruce's worldview to life on screen. But when the film eventually left Bruce's living room and reached the desks of Hollywood executives, it was clear that the vision was not something they easily understood. The very things that Bruce had poured his soul into, his philosophy, his approach to violence and conflict, his use of foreign languages, were the very aspect of the project that made Hollywood nervous. Hollywood's reaction, reformulation. When the silent flute finally made its way to Hollywood, Bruce Lee and his collaborators quickly realized that the film they were trying to create was not something that the industry was ready for. The project, which had been carefully crafted over late-night discussions and intense training sessions, was seen by the studios as something entirely foreign, a challenge to their understanding of what a successful martial arts film could be. For Bruce, the film had always been about more than just action. It was about philosophy, about pushing the boundaries of martial arts as a discipline, and about exploring deep spiritual and psychological concepts. But to Hollywood executives, this was a risk they weren't willing to take. They had no experience with a film like this, one that would blend martial arts with philosophical musings and deeper psychological conflicts. What they saw on the pages of The Silent Flute didn't match any of the formulas that had made martial arts films successful up until that point. The movie was full of deserts, ancient monasteries, and wandering monks, with a main character who would move through the strange world, confronting not just external enemies, but his own inner demons. And in Bruce's vision, the film wasn't just set in exotic locations. It was multilingual, with scenes written in Thai, Cantonese, Arabic, and Japanese, all with subtitles that Bruce insisted on keeping. For him, this was a matter of honesty, of staying true to the cultures being represented, and making sure that the language of the film matched the story he was telling. But Hollywood didn't see it that way. To them, it was a red flag. It wasn't just a language barrier. It was a symbol of something deeper, a level of authenticity and complexity that they didn't know how to market. The film was bold, yes, but also a challenge to the established norms of the industry. The violence in the script wasn't the flashy, over-the-top action of typical martial arts films. Instead, it was clinical, almost cold. Bruce's fight scenes were designed to be jarring and realistic. Groin shattered, neck snapped midair, and enemies left broken and lifeless. But it wasn't just the violence that made Hollywood nervous. It was the way the film treated sex. In The Silent Flute, sex wasn't just a way to titillate the audience. It was a philosophical test, a way to explore human attachment and desire. The explicit sex scenes were an integral part of Bruce's vision for the film, meant to illustrate how deeply ingrained emotions, desires, and attachments can shape a person's reality and hold them back from achieving true self-mastery. But to the studio executives, this was an uncomfortable territory. It didn't fit within the tidy box of what was considered acceptable for an action film at the time. And then there was the biggest issue, Bruce himself. Hollywood had always struggled with race and representation, and the idea of a Chinese lead actor carrying a film like The Silent Flute was a hard sell. They had no problem with Bruce Lee as an action star, but this film was different. It required more than just a talented martial artist. It required a man who could embody a deep, complex philosophy, a man who could challenge the conventions of Hollywood and force the industry to rethink what martial arts films could be. As Hollywood's reactions to The Silent Flute grew more and more critical, the requests for changes came fast and furious. The executives wanted the violence toned down, the foreign languages cut, and the spiritual aspects simplified. Bruce Lee wasn't opposed to clarity in the film, but he wasn't willing to hollow out his meaning just for the sake of making it more palatable to mainstream audiences. The spirit of the project was too important to him, and that's when the studio came up with an idea that would eventually kill the film in its original form. What if we put a more familiar Western face in the lead role? For Bruce, this suggestion was a non-starter. The film had been built around his own philosophy, his own martial arts journey, his own vision. To hand it over to someone else, someone who didn't share his worldview, was unthinkable. To Bruce, The Silent Flute was not just a film. It was a reflection of who he was. He had to be the one to live out the philosophy on screen. If the lead role was going to go to anyone else, then the entire point of the film would be lost. James Coburn, who had been working alongside Bruce on the project, understood this sentiment. He had seen Bruce in action, had witnessed him acting out entire fight sequences, not just as a display of physical skill, but as a way of expressing deeper philosophical truths. Coburn knew that Bruce wasn't concerned with vanity. This wasn't about ego. It was about integrity. But Coburn also understood the business side of things. The industry had always struggled with the idea of a Chinese lead in a major film. Even though Bruce was a huge star in the martial arts world, The Silent Flute was asking Hollywood to take a leap into uncharted territory. And that was a risk the studios weren't willing to take. As the discussion continued, the changes became more insistent. Hollywood executives pushed for a more marketable film. They wanted less foreign language, less explicit content, and less Bruce Lee. The pressure was mounting, and Bruce became increasingly frustrated with the process. He felt that Hollywood was only interested in the kicks and the fights, not the philosophy behind them. As he told Coburn, Hollywood wants a finger, but not the moon it points to. In other words, they were interested in the superficial aspects of martial arts, the physical skill and spectacle, but not the deeper meaning that made Bruce's fighting so unique. But even as the pressure mounted, Bruce refused to back down. He wasn't going to let The Silent Flute become just another watered-down action film. And so, the battle between Bruce and Hollywood continued, with the industry demanding more changes, and Bruce holding firm in his belief that the film had to remain true to his vision. On paper, the India trip was supposed to be a solution, a chance to save The Silent Flute from becoming just another failed project. The plan was simple. Bruce Lee, James Coburn, and Sterling Silliphant would travel to India to scout real locations for film. The idea was that with actual, exotic landscapes and a concrete plan in place, the film would move from being seen as a risky endeavor to an inevitable success. But as often happens with grand ideas, reality proved much more complicated. The trip began with high hopes. The landscapes in India were perfect for the story. Ancient stone towns, vast deserts, and mythic horizons that seemed to echo the very themes of the film. The idea was that the setting would serve as a backdrop for the internal journeys of the characters, emphasizing the spiritual and philosophical aspects of Bruce's vision. Yet, despite the beauty of the locations, the trip quickly began to unravel. The first signs of trouble appeared when the logistical realities of the trip became clear. What had seemed like a simple scouting mission quickly turned into a grueling test of patience and endurance. The roads were terrible, the drives were long, and the schedule was unpredictable. What was meant to be a smooth, contemplative journey became an exhausting slog through the heat and dust of India. Missed calls, unreliable contacts, and endless waiting became the norm. For Coburn, the trip was more than just physically exhausting. It was an emotional strain. He had joined the project because of his admiration for Bruce Lee. But now, as the reality of the situation sank in, he began to feel a growing sense of frustration. Bruce, despite his charisma and relentless drive, was not immune to the discomforts of the journey. As they made their way through the rough terrain of India, Bruce's ever-present energy and focus began to wear on Coburn. Bruce had a habit of humming pop songs when he was deep in thought, a quirk that was endearing in their relaxed, late-night sessions at home, but now felt like a constant, grating presence in the heat of the Indian landscape. One afternoon, as they drove through the scorching desert heat, Coburn reached his breaking point. Bruce, in the backseat of the car, was humming as he often did when lost in his thoughts. Coburn, clearly exhausted and on edge from the brutal travel conditions, snapped. He turned to Bruce and barked, "For Christ's sake, man, would you cut that out? You're driving me crazy." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, there was silence. Bruce didn't argue, but according to those who were with him, he shook his fist at Coburn's back, a small but significant sign of the tension that had been building between them. In an instant, the close partnership between Bruce and Coburn had cracked. This small incident was just the tip of the iceberg. Over the course of the trip, tensions continued to build. Bruce had always been a man driven by an unshakable belief in his own vision, and when things weren't going according to plan, his frustrations became palpable. The contrast between the grand vision for the film and the harsh reality of their journey became too much for Bruce to handle. But it wasn't just the trip itself that was causing the strain. It was a deeper realization that the film Bruce had been pouring his heart and soul into might never see the light of day. When they arrived at the hotel in India, another painful reminder of Hollywood's lingering bias surfaced. The hotel staff, upon seeing James Coburn, immediately assigned him the best room and gave him preferential treatment. Coburn was, after all, a famous Hollywood actor, and this treatment was a kind that he had long been accustomed to. But for Bruce, this felt like a painful echo of the very issue he had been fighting against his entire career. The system always placed the Western, often white, Lee at the center of the story, while relegating the Asian character to the background. Here, in India, a hotel in the middle of their scouting mission, the old Hollywood hierarchy was playing out again. Bruce, the true star of the silent flute, was being treated as secondary to Coburn, who was only supposed to be his collaborator, not the focal point. Bruce's frustration boiled over. He vented to Silliphant, his screenwriter, saying that he, not Coburn, was supposed to be the star of the silent flute. He believed that one day he would be the biggest movie star in the world. Bigger than Coburn, bigger than Steve McQueen, the icon he was often compared to. This wasn't just about ego. It was about a deep, painful recognition of the racial and cultural barriers that had always limited his career. Bruce could see, with painful clarity, how Hollywood still viewed him. No matter how famous he became, he was always going to be relegated to the background in favor of the white Western star. The tension reached a tipping point. The scouting trip, once seen as a potential lifeline for the film, had devolved into a chaotic mess of missed opportunities and mounting frustrations. Locations were difficult to lock down. Communication with the local crew was a constant struggle. Budgets began to drift. And with every setback, the vision for the silent flute seemed to slip further away. What had started as an idealistic journey for a film with a deeper message now felt like a struggle just to keep the project afloat. For Bruce, it wasn't just the practical difficulties of the trip that weighed on him. It was a growing realization that the film he had envisioned was slipping through his fingers. The film's philosophy, the very soul of the project, seemed to be fading with each passing day. The realization that the silent flute might never be made the way he had originally dreamed it, that it was becoming more and more of a diluted version of his vision, was a devastating blow. The India trip was abandoned. The location scouting came to a halt, and plans were put on ice. Everyone went home, physically exhausted but emotionally spent. And for Bruce, there was something far deeper at play. He wasn't just leaving India with sunburn and fatigue. He was leaving with the painful knowledge that his most personal project, the one he had believed in with every fiber of his being, was slipping away from him. Coburn, too, felt the weight of this realization. The dream of the silent flute was beginning to crack, and what had once been a shared vision between him and Bruce was now unraveling thread by thread. And there you have it, the story behind Bruce Lee's Silent Flute, a film that could have been a revolutionary masterpiece, but was never allowed to exist in its true form. The road to its creation was filled with challenges, compromises, and missed opportunities. Yet, even though we never got to see Bruce's complete vision on screen, the legacy of his ideas still lives on in the martial arts world, in cinema, and in the hearts of fans around the globe. Bruce Lee's philosophy wasn't just about fighting. It was about mastery, understanding, and transcending the ego. That's the real power of the silent flute, not just the action, but the depth of thought that went into it. Even though Hollywood couldn't handle the rawness of Bruce's vision at the time, his message still resonates with those who are ready to listen. So, what can we take from this? Sometimes, the things we create may not be recognized in their true form, but that doesn't mean they're not powerful. Keep pushing forward, stay true to your vision, and never settle for anything less than what you believe is right. Bruce Lee's journey is proof that greatness isn't always recognized at the moment it happens, but that doesn't stop it from shaping the future. Thanks for joining me on this journey through the lost movie of Bruce Lee. If you've been inspired, drop a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the untold, the forgotten, and the legendary. Until next time, keep living with purpose and always strive to be your best self.